The porch light flickered against the darkness as Andrea White stepped out of the shadows, her bare feet silent on the wooden boards. I could see her breath in the cold air, small clouds disappearing into the night. She moved toward me with careful steps, her white nightgown catching what little moonlight filtered through the trees. "Samuel," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of wind through the leaves. "Pretend you don't hear them inside." I wanted to ask what she meant, but the look in her eyes stopped me. There was something desperate there, something that made my chest tight with worry. Behind her, through the windows of the old farmhouse, I could see shadows moving. Voices carried on the night air, muffled but urgent. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold against my skin. "Please," she said, "just for tonight, pretend you don't hear any of it." "Hello, my name is Samuel Lewis. I'm 32 years old. I work as a carpenter in a small town outside Portland, Oregon, where the rain falls more days than not, and everyone knows everyone else's business. 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life looked like. I had my tools, my truck, and a steady stream of work fixing up old houses for people who had more dreams than money. It was a good life, quiet and predictable. Then I met Andrea White, and everything changed. It started on a Tuesday morning in September. I was driving out to the Henderson place to look at some rotted porch steps when I saw her standing by the side of County Road 12. Her car, an old blue Honda with rust around the wheel wells, sat with its hood up, steam rising from the engine like morning fog. I pulled over without thinking about it. That's what you do in small towns. You stop for people who need help. "Engine trouble?" I asked, walking toward her. She looked up from where she'd been staring at the maze of hoses and metal under the hood. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore jeans and a green sweater that brought out the color of her eyes. There was something about the way she stood, straight back but tired, that made me want to help her with more than just her car. "I think it overheated," she said. "I don't know much about cars." I leaned over the engine, checking the radiator and hoses. The problem was simple enough, a loose clamp that had let coolant leak out. "I can fix this," I told her, "but you'll need some coolant. There's a gas station about 5 miles back." "I don't have a way to get there," she said, and I heard something in her voice that sounded like more than just frustration about the car. "I'll drive you," I offered. "We can get what you need and come back." She hesitated for a moment, studying my face like she was trying to decide if she could trust me. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you, I'm Andrea." "Samuel," I said, "but most people call me Sam." The drive to the gas station took us through the heart of our little town. I pointed out landmarks as we went: the old mill that had been converted into apartments, the diner where the coffee was strong and the pie was better, the library that stayed open late on Thursdays for book club meetings. "You've lived here your whole life?" she asked. "Born and raised," I said. "Left for college. Came back after my dad had his heart attack. Someone needed to take over his contracting business." "Do you like it? The work, I mean." I thought about that as we pulled into the gas station. "I like fixing things," I said. "There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it whole again." She was quiet for a moment. "That sounds nice," she said, and there was a wistfulness in her voice that made me curious about her story. We bought the coolant and drove back to her car. I fixed the loose clamp and filled the radiator while she watched, asking questions about how engines worked and why cars overheated. She was genuinely interested, not just making conversation, and I found myself explaining more than I usually would. "Where are you headed?" I asked as I closed the hood. "I just moved here," she said. "I'm renting the old Morrison place out on Elm Creek Road." I knew the house. It had been empty for 2 years, ever since old Tom Morrison passed away. It was a good house, solid bones, but it needed work, the kind of work I specialized in. "That's a beautiful spot," I said, "but the house probably needs some attention." "It does," she admitted. "The real estate agent said the roof leaks and some of the windows don't close properly." Before we see how this ends, tell us where you are watching from and hype this video in the comments. I'd love to know I'm not alone in feeling like sometimes the most important moments in our lives start with the simplest acts of kindness. "I could take a look at it," I offered, "give you an estimate on what needs to be done." She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that very much." That's how it started, a broken down car on a country road. and an offer to help. I drove out to the Morrison place the next day, my truck loaded with tools and a clipboard for taking notes. The house sat on 5 acres of land that rolled down to Elm Creek. It was a 2-story farmhouse built in the 1920s with a wraparound porch and tall windows that would let in plenty of light once they were properly sealed. The roof needed new shingles in several places, and the front steps sagged under the weight of decades. Andrea met me at the front door wearing paint-stained jeans and an old t-shirt. Her hair was tied up in a bandana, and there were smudges of white paint on her cheek. "I started on the kitchen," she said, leading me inside. I figured I should at least make one room livable. The interior of the house was better than I'd expected. The hardwood floors were solid under layers of old carpet and linoleum. The plaster walls had cracks but no major damage. The bones of the house were good, just like I'd thought. "This is a beautiful place," I told her as we walked through the rooms. "It's going to be amazing that when you are finished with it." "If I ever finish with it," she said. "Sometimes I wonder if I bit off more than I can chew." "Why did you choose this house?" I asked. "There are easier places to live around here." She was quiet for a long moment, looking out one of the tall windows toward the creek. "I needed somewhere quiet," she finally said. "Somewhere I could think." I didn't push for more explanation. Everyone has their reasons for the choices they make, and Andrea clearly had hers. Instead, I spent the next 2 hours going through the house room by room, making notes about what needed to be fixed and what could wait. The list was long but manageable. New roof shingles, window repairs, some plumbing work in the upstairs bathroom, and general maintenance that had been deferred for too long. It was the kind of project I enjoyed, bringing an old house back to life. "I can start next week," I told her, as we sat on the front porch going over my estimate. "The roof work should be done before the heavy rains start." "How long will it take?" she asked. "Depends on how much you want done at once," I said. "I could spread it out over a few months, do a little at a time so it's not so disruptive." "I'd like that," she said. "I'm not in a hurry." That was the beginning of our friendship. I started coming out to the Morrison place 3 days a week, working on different projects while Andrea painted rooms and planted a garden. We'd take breaks together, sitting on the porch with coffee or cold drinks depending on the weather, talking about everything and nothing. I learned that she'd been a teacher in Seattle before moving to our town. She'd taught 3rd grade for 8 years, loved working with children, but something had happened that made her need a change. She never said what exactly, just that she'd needed to get away and start over. "Do you miss it?" I asked one afternoon as we watched clouds build over the mountains. "Teaching, I mean." "I miss the kids," she said, "but I don't miss the rest of it. The politics, the pressure, the feeling like I was always fighting for resources that should have been there in the first place." "What will you do here?" "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "I have some savings, enough to last a while. Maybe I'll substitute teach or find something completely different. For now, I just want to focus on the house." I understood that. Sometimes you need to fix your surroundings before you can fix yourself. As the weeks passed, I found myself looking forward to the days I worked at Andrea's house more than any other jobs. Not just because the work was interesting, but because of her company. She was easy to talk to, quick to laugh, and genuinely curious about the world around her. She'd bring me lunch sometimes, sandwiches and soup that we'd eat sitting on the porch steps. Other times, she'd work alongside me, holding boards while I measured and cut, or painting trim while I worked on the windows. "You don't have to help," I told her one day as she carefully painted around a window frame. "I can handle this." "I know," she said, "but I like helping. It makes me feel like I'm really part of making this place home." There was something in the way she said home that caught my attention, like it was a word she hadn't used in a long time, or maybe one she wasn't sure she had a right to use. "Have you always lived alone?" I asked, then immediately regretted the question. It was too personal, too much like prying, but she didn't seem to mind. "No," she said quietly. "I was married for 6 years, divorced about a year ago." "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be," she replied. It was the right thing to do, for both of us. We just wanted different things from life. I wanted to ask what kind of different things, but something in her voice told me the conversation was over. We worked in comfortable silence for the rest of the afternoon. October brought the first real rains, and I spent several days on Andrea's roof replacing shingles and ceiling leaks. She'd bring me coffee in a thermos, and we'd talk while I took breaks, sitting under the covered part of the porch while rain drummed on the new shingles above us. "It sounds different now," she said one morning, listening to the rain. "More musical somehow." "That's because it's not leaking," I said. "Rain sounds better when it's staying where it belongs." She laughed at that, a sound I'd grown to love hearing. "Is that your philosophy of life? Everything sounds better when it stays where it belongs?" "Maybe," I said. "I've never thought about it that way, but maybe." "What about people?" she asked. "Do people sound better when they stay where they belong?" I looked at her then, really looked at her. There was something vulnerable in the question, something that made me think she was asking about more than just philosophy. "I think people belong wherever they're happiest," I said carefully. "Wherever they can be themselves without having to pretend to be someone else." She nodded slowly. "I like that answer," she said. November came with shorter days and longer conversations. I'd finished most of the major repairs on the house, but Andrea kept finding smaller projects for me to work on. A squeaky door here, a loose board there. Things that weren't urgent but gave me reasons to keep coming around. I didn't mind. In fact, I looked forward to those visits more than I probably should have. Andrea had become important to me in a way that felt both natural and surprising. She was smart and funny and kind, but there was also something fragile about her that made me want to protect her from whatever had hurt her before. One evening in late November, I was replacing a broken pane of glass in the kitchen window when she came up behind me with 2 cups of hot chocolate. "It's getting cold out there," she said, handing me one of the cups. "Winter's coming," I agreed, testing the seal around the new glass. "This should keep the drafts out, though." "Samuel," she said, and something in her tone made me turn around. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you keep coming here? I mean, the house is basically fixed now. You could be working on other projects, making more money." I set down my tools and really looked at her. She was standing by the kitchen counter, holding her cup of hot chocolate with both hands, like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. "Do you want me to stop coming?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "That's not what I mean. I don't want you to feel obligated, like you have to keep checking on me." "I don't feel obligated," I said. "I come here because I want to, because I enjoy your company." She was quiet for a moment, looking down into her cup. "I enjoy your company too," she said softly. "More than I probably should." "Why shouldn't you?" "Because I'm not very good at this," she said. "At letting people get close, at trusting that they'll stick around." I understood then that we were talking about more than just friendship. We were talking about the careful dance that 2 people do when they're starting to care about each other but aren't sure if it's safe to admit it. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, "unless you want me to." She looked up at me then, and I saw something shift in her expression, like a door opening that had been closed for a long time. "I don't want you to go anywhere," she said. That conversation changed things between us. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, like the way seasons change. We started spending more time together outside of work projects. She'd invite me to stay for dinner after I finished whatever small task had brought me to her house that day. We'd cook together in her newly painted kitchen, talking about books and movies and the small dramas of small-town life. I learned that she read voraciously, everything from literary fiction to mystery novels to books about gardening and home repair. Her living room was filled with boxes of books that she hadn't unpacked yet, like she wasn't quite ready to commit to staying. "Why haven't you unpacked these?" I asked one evening, looking at the towers of cardboard boxes. "I don't know," she said. "I guess unpacking books feels so final. Like once they're on shelves, I'm really here to stay." "And you're not sure you want to stay?" "I want to stay," she said. "Does that make sense?" It did make sense. I'd felt the same way about a lot of things in my life. The difference between wanting something and wanting to want it was the difference between certainty and hope. December brought snow and longer evenings spent by Andrea's fireplace. I'd helped her clean out the chimney and repair the damper, and now we could have Yule fires that filled the living room with warmth and dancing light. One evening as we sat reading on opposite ends of her couch, she looked up from her book and said, "Samuel, can I tell you something?" Always, I said, setting aside the woodworking magazine I'd been browsing. My marriage didn't end because we wanted different things, she said. That's what I tell people, because it's easier than the truth. I waited, not pushing, just letting her know I was listening. It ended because my husband had an affair, she continued, with another teacher at my school. They'd been seeing each other for almost 2 years before I found out. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, she said. I mean, that was terrible, but the worst part was how it made me doubt everything. Every conversation, every smile, every time he said he loved me. I started wondering if any of it had been real. I understood then why she'd needed to get away, why she'd moved to a place where nobody knew her story. Sometimes you need distance to figure out who you are when you're not defined by what happened to you. That's why I'm not very good at this, she said, gesturing between us, at trusting that someone means what they say. I mean what I say, I told her. I know, she said, that's what scares me. We didn't talk more about it that night, but something had shifted again. She trusted me with the truth, and that felt like a gift I needed to handle carefully. Christmas came and went quietly. I spent the day with my parents, as I had every year since moving back home. Andrea went to visit her sister in Portland, the first time she'd left town since moving here. She came back after New Year's with stories about the city and a renewed appreciation for small-town quiet. I forgot how loud cities are, she said as we walked along Elm Creek one afternoon in early January. Not just the traffic and sirens, but the constant noise of so many people living so close together. Do you miss it? Some things, she said. Museums, good restaurants, the feeling that there's always something happening. But I don't miss the loneliness. You were lonely in a city full of people? The worst kind of lonely, she said. Surrounded by people but feeling like none of them really knew me. I thought about that as we walked. I'd never lived anywhere but here, never experienced that kind of anonymous loneliness. But I understood what she meant about being known. In a small town, people knew your business whether you wanted them to or not, but they also knew your character. They knew what you stood for and what you could be counted on to do. February brought a warm spell that melted most of the snow and made us both restless for spring. Andrea started planting her garden in earnest, ordering seed catalogs and sketching out plots for vegetables and flowers. I want to plant fruit trees, she told me one afternoon as we walked the perimeter of her property. Apples and pears, maybe some cherry trees along the creek. That's a long-term commitment, I said. Fruit trees take years to mature. I know, she said, and there was something decisive in her voice that hadn't been there before. I'm ready for long-term. That evening, as we sat on her porch watching the sun set over the mountains, she reached for my hand. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact between us, and the simple gesture felt monumental. Samuel, she said, I need to tell you something else. My heart jumped, worried that she was about to reveal another painful truth from her past. I'm falling in love with you, she said, and it terrifies me. I turned to look at her, this woman who had become so important to me over the past few months. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders, and the setting sun painted her face in shades of gold and pink. It terrifies me too, I admitted. But in a good way. Is there a good way to be terrified? I think so, I said. I think being terrified means you know something matters, that you have something to lose. She squeezed my hand. I don't want to lose this, she said, whatever this is. You won't, I promised, not if I have anything to say about it. That night, for the first time, she asked me to stay, not for anything dramatic or rushed, just to fall asleep next to someone who cared about her. We lay in her bed talking quietly until we both drifted off, her head on my shoulder and my arm around her waist. I woke before dawn and watched her sleep, marveling at how peaceful she looked. The worried lines that sometimes appeared around her eyes during the day were gone, and she looked younger, more carefree. March brought the first real signs of spring and a new rhythm to our relationship. I still worked on projects around her house, but now I was there most evenings and many weekends too. We cooked together, read together, planned the garden together. She started substitute teaching at the elementary school in town, and I could see how much she missed working with children. The kids loved her immediately, and she came home with stories about their questions and observations that made us both laugh. "Have you thought about applying for a permanent position?" I asked one evening as she graded spelling tests at the kitchen table. "They don't have any openings," she said, "but Mr. Henderson mentioned that they might need someone next year. The third grade teacher is thinking about retiring. Would you want that? To teach here permanently?" She looked up from the papers she was grading. "I would," she said. "I really would." It was another step toward permanence, and another sign that she was ready to build a life here. April brought warm weather and the start of serious garden work. We spent weekends preparing beds and planting seeds, working side by side in the rich soil along Elm Creek. Andrea had ambitious plans for vegetables and herbs, flowers, and the fruit trees she'd ordered from a nursery in Hood River. "This is going to be beautiful," I said one afternoon as we planted the young apple trees she'd selected. "It's going to take years to see what it really looks like," she said. "But I can picture it. Can you?" I could picture it. I could picture the trees heavy with fruit, the vegetable garden producing enough food to share with neighbors, flower beds that would attract butterflies and hummingbirds. I could picture Andrea and me, older and grayer, sitting on the porch watching our grandchildren play under the trees we'd planted. The thought surprised me with its clarity and certainty. I'd never been one to make long-term plans, preferring to take life as it came. But with Andrea, I found myself thinking about the future in ways I never had before. May brought the job offer from the school district and a decision that would determine whether Andrea's tentative roots in our town would grow deeper or be pulled up once again. She came home from the interview excited but nervous, pacing around the kitchen while I made dinner. "They offered me the position," she said, "in third grade, starting in September." "That's wonderful," I said, though I could tell from her expression that she was conflicted about something. "It is wonderful," she agreed. "It's exactly what I wanted, but what?" "But it means I'm really staying," she said. "It means this isn't just a temporary retreat from my real life. This becomes my real life." I understood her hesitation. Making that kind of commitment meant accepting that she'd found what she was looking for, that she was ready to stop running from her past and start building her future. "Is that what you want?" I asked. "For this to be your real life?" She looked around the kitchen we'd painted together, through the windows that showed the garden we'd planted, toward the living room where we'd spent so many evenings reading by the fire. "Yes," she said, and her voice was strong and certain. "This is what I want." That night at night, we celebrated with a bottle of wine and plans for how she'd set up her new classroom. She was full of ideas for projects and field trips, ways to connect her students' learning to the natural world around them. "I want to teach them about the creek," she said, "about the plants and animals that live there, how the ecosystem works. Maybe we can even do water quality testing." "I could help with that," I offered. "Build some equipment, maybe come in and talk about how construction affects waterways." "Would you really?" "Of course, Varn," I said. "I'd love to be part of it." June brought long days and warm evenings, and the garden began to show the results of all our work. The vegetables were thriving, the flower beds were full of color, and the fruit trees, though still small, were putting out healthy new growth. We fell into a comfortable routine of work and leisure, sharing meals and chores and quiet moments on the porch. It felt like the life I'd always wanted but hadn't known how to ask for. One evening in late June, as we sat watching fireflies dance over the garden, Andrea said, "Samuel, I have something to tell you." The tone of her voice made me look at her sharply. There was something serious in her expression, something that made my stomach tighten with worry. "What is it?" I asked. "My ex-husband called today," she said. "He wants to talk." I felt a cold knot form in my chest. "What kind of talk?" "He says he made a mistake, that he wants to try again." The words hit me like a physical blow. After all these months of careful building, of trust slowly growing between us, the past was reaching out to threaten everything we'd created. "What did you tell him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I told him I'd think about it," she said, and my heart sank. "Oh, Samuel, look at me," she said, reaching for my hand. "I told him I'd think about it because I wanted to be sure of my answer. I wanted to be absolutely certain." I looked at her, afraid of what I might see in her face. "I'm certain," she said. "I don't want to go back to that life. I don't want to go back to being the person I was when I was with him. I want to stay here, with you, building this life we've started together." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by something that might have been joy. Are you sure? I asked. I don't want you to make this decision because you feel like you have to, because you think I need you to choose me. I am choosing you, she said. But more than that, I'm choosing this life. I'm choosing the person I am when I'm here, with you. I'm choosing the future we can build together. That night, we made love for the first time with a new kind of certainty between us. Not just the physical expression of attraction, but the emotional acknowledgement that we were committed to each other, to the life we were building together. July brought hot weather and long days working in the garden, canning vegetables and making jam from the wild blackberries that grew along the creek. Andrea threw herself into these domestic tasks with an enthusiasm that spoke of someone who had finally found her place in the world. I never did any of this when I was married, she told me one afternoon, and as we processed tomatoes for sauce. He thought it was old-fashioned, a waste of time when you could just buy everything at the store. What do you think? I asked. I think there's something satisfying about providing for yourself, she said, about knowing exactly where your food comes from and how it was grown. I understood what she meant. There was a connection to the earth and the seasons in this kind of work that felt important, especially in a world that seemed increasingly disconnected from natural rhythms. August brought the first hints of fall and preparations for the new school year. Andrea spent long days at the school, setting up her classroom and meeting with other teachers to plan curriculum. She came home excited about her students and the projects she had planned for them. There are 22 kids in my class, she told me one evening, including the Morrison twins and little Sarah Chen, whose parents own the hardware store. I knew most of the families she mentioned, had worked on their houses or knew them from church or the annual harvest festival. It felt good to know that Andrea would be teaching children I cared about, that she was becoming part of the fabric of our community. September arrived with cooler mornings and the start of the school year. Andrea left early each morning with a travel mug of coffee and a bag full of lesson plans, returning in the afternoon with stories about her students and their progress. Tommy Rodriguez asked me today if I was going to marry you, she said one evening as we worked in the garden, harvesting the last of the summer squash. What did you tell him? I told him that was a very personal question, she said, but she was smiling. But it got me thinking. About what? About whether that's something you'd want, she said. Marriage, I mean. Not necessarily right away, but someday. I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. She was kneeling in the dirt beside a tomato plant, her hair tied back with a bandana and her hands dirty from the earth. She looked beautiful and natural and perfectly at home. I'd want that, I said. Someday, when you're ready, I'd want that very much. Good, she said, smiling, because I think I'd want that too. October brought the Harvest Festival and Andrea's first real introduction to the social life of our small town. She helped organize the school's booth and volunteered to judge the children's pumpkin carvings contest. I watched her throughout the day, seeing how easily she fit in, how naturally she connected with people. She's good for you, my mother said as we watched Andrea help a group of children with their jack-o'-lanterns. I haven't seen you this happy in years. She was right. I was happy in a way I'd never been before. Not just content, but genuinely excited about life and the future. November brought the first snow and cozy evenings by the fire. Andrea had fully settled into her teaching routine, and her students clearly adored her. Parents stopped me around town to tell me how much their children loved Miss White's class, how excited they were about the projects she assigned. She's making a real difference, Janet Nguyen told me at the grocery store. My daughter comes home every day with something new she's learned about nature or science. It's wonderful to see a child so excited about school. It was wonderful to see, and it was wonderful to see Andrea so fulfilled by her work. She'd found her place both professionally and personally, and it showed in everything she did. December brought our first Christmas together in the quiet joy of shared traditions. We cut down a tree from the back of her property and decorated it with ornaments she'd collected over the years, mixed with new ones we bought together at the church bazaar. This feels like home, she said one evening as we sat by the tree, drinking hot chocolate and watching snow fall outside the windows. It is home, I said, for both of us. January of our second year together brought a cold snap that froze the creek and covered the world in a layer of ice that turned every surface into crystal. Andrea's students were fascinated by the ice formations. and she organized a science lesson around the different ways water freezes. They want to know everything, she told me one evening as she graded papers by the fire. How thick does ice have to be to walk on? Why do some parts of the creek freeze and others don't? How do fish survive when the water freezes? Do you know the answers? Some of them, she said, but I'm learning along with them. That's one of the things I love about teaching. There's always something new to discover. February brought Valentine's Day and a quiet dinner at home that felt more romantic than any fancy restaurant could have been. We cooked together as we did most evenings, but this time we made it special with candles and wine and the good china Andrea had inherited from her grandmother. I have something for you, I said after we'd finished eating. I handed her a small wrapped box, nervous about her reaction. Inside was a key, old brass worn smooth by years of use. What's this? She asked, holding it up to the candlelight. It's the key to my house, I said. I thought maybe it was time we stopped maintaining two households. She looked at me, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to let me move in with you, I said. This house, this land, it's where you belong. Where we belong together. She was quiet for a long moment, turning the key over in her hands. Yes, she said finally. Yes, I'd like that very much. March brought the practical work of combining our lives more completely. I sold my house to a young couple just starting out, keeping only the tools and furniture we needed. Moving my things to Andrea Rhea's house felt like the completion of something we'd been building toward since that first day I'd fixed her car. It's strange, she said one evening as we arranged my books on her shelves. I lived alone for so long after my divorce. I thought I'd never want to share space with someone again. And now? Now I can't imagine not sharing it with you, she said. The house feels more like itself with both of us in it. April brought warm weather and the second spring in Andrea's garden. The fruit trees we'd planted the year before were bigger and stronger, and this year we added berry bushes and expanded the vegetable garden. I want to try growing corn this year, Andrea said as we planned the new beds. And maybe some melons. That's a lot of garden to maintain, I said. We'll have help, she said. Some of my students want to learn about gardening. I thought we could start a club, let them help with planting and weeding in exchange for learning about how food grows. It was a perfect idea, typical of Andrea's ability to connect her teaching to real-world experience. The garden club became one of the highlights of spring, with 8 children coming every Saturday to help plant and tend the growing beds. May brought the end of Andrea's first full school year and confirmation that she'd found her calling. The principal asked her to take on additional responsibilities the following year, including mentoring new teachers and developing the school's environmental education program. It's more work, she told me as we discussed the offer, but it's exactly the kind of work I want to be doing. Then you should do it, I said. I'll support you however I can. June brought long days and the satisfaction of watching our garden flourish under the care of both adults and children. The students in Andrea's garden club took pride in the vegetables they'd helped plant, and several parents mentioned that their children were more interested in eating vegetables now that they understood how they grew. You're making a difference, I told Andrea one evening as we watched the sunset from our porch. Not just with academics, but with how these kids see the world. We're making a difference, she corrected. This wouldn't work without your help, without the way you've embraced having a dozen children trampling through our garden every week. She was right. It had become our project, our shared investment in the future of our community. July brought hot weather and the first real harvest from our expanded garden. We had more vegetables than we could eat, so we started a small stand at the farmer's market, selling excess produce and using the profits to buy supplies for Andrea's classroom. I never thought I'd be a farmer, Andrea said one Saturday as we set up our booth at the market. You're not a farmer, I said. You're a teacher who grows things. There's a difference. What's the difference? A farmer grows things to sell them, I said. You grow things to understand them, and then you teach other people to understand them too. August brought preparations for another school year and the news that Andrea had been chosen to present her environmental education program at a state conference for teachers. They want me to talk about how we use the garden and the creek to teach science and math, she said. Excited but nervous about speaking to a large group? You'll be wonderful, I assured her. You're passionate about it, and that passion shows. She was wonderful. I drove with her to the conference in Portland and watched from the back of the room as she presented her program to an audience of 200 teachers. She was confident and articulate, sharing not just the practical details of what she did, but the philosophy behind it. Education should connect children to their environment, she said during her presentation. When they understand how their local ecosystem works, they become better stewards of the natural world. The response was enthusiastic, and several teachers approached her afterward to ask for more details about implementing similar programs in their own schools. September brought the start of Andrea's third year of teaching and my proposal. I'd been thinking about it for months, planning how and when to ask her to marry me. I wanted it to be special but not overwhelming, romantic but not theatrical. In the end, I decided to propose in the garden we'd built together, surrounded by the fruit trees we'd planted and the vegetables we'd grown. It was a Sunday evening in late September, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. We'd spent the day harvesting apples from the trees that had finally produced their first real crop, and we were sitting on the porch steps, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the last light fade from the sky. "Andrea," I said, reaching into my pocket for the ring I'd been carrying for weeks, "I have something to ask you." She turned to look at me, and I saw the understanding dawn in her eyes as I dropped to one knee beside the porch steps. "Will you marry me?" I asked, holding out the ring I'd chosen with help from her sister, a simple band with a stone the color of her eyes. She was quiet for a long moment, looking at the ring, at me, at the house and garden we'd built together. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, of course I'll marry you." October brought wedding planning and the joy of sharing our news with friends and family. We decided on a small ceremony in the spring, held in our garden when the fruit trees would be in bloom. "I want it to be here," Andrea said as we walked through the garden, imagining where we'd set up chairs and an altar. "This is where we built our life together. This is where we should promise to keep building it." November brought Thanksgiving and the first holiday we celebrated as an engaged couple. My parents hosted dinner, and Andrea fit seamlessly into the family traditions, helping my mother in the kitchen and listening to my father's stories about the early days of his contracting business. "She's perfect for you," my mother whispered to me as we cleared the table after dinner. "I've never seen you so settled, so content." December brought our second Christmas together in the quiet satisfaction of traditions that were becoming our own. We cut down another tree from our land, made cookies for Andrea's students, and spent long evenings by the fire planning our wedding and our future. "I want children," Andrea said one evening as we lay in bed, snow falling softly outside our windows. "Not right away, but someday. Is that something you want too?" "I want everything with you," I said. "Children, grandchildren. Growing old together in this house we've made our home." January brought the new year and detailed wedding planning. We kept the guest list small, just family and close friends, and focused on making the day meaningful rather than elaborate. "I don't need a big wedding," Andrea said as we addressed invitations at the kitchen table. "I just need to marry you." February brought the coldest weather we'd had in years and cozy evenings spent planning our honeymoon. We decided on a trip to the Oregon coast, a week in a cabin overlooking the ocean where we could walk on the beach and read by the fire. "I've never been to the coast," Andrea admitted. "Can you believe that? I lived in the Pacific Northwest for years and never made it to the ocean." "We'll go every year," I promised. "It can be our anniversary tradition." March brought the first signs of spring and the final preparations for our wedding. The fruit trees were beginning to bud, and Andrea's students were excited about the prospect of their teacher getting married in the garden they'd helped tend. "Can we come see the flowers after the wedding?" Sarah Chen asked during a garden club meeting. "Of course," Andrea said. "The garden belongs to all of us." April brought warm weather and our wedding day. The fruit trees were in full bloom, creating a canopy of pink and white flowers over the simple altar we'd set up beside the creek. 25 guests sat in wooden chairs arranged in a semicircle, and Andrea's sister played guitar as we exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. "Samuel," Andrea said, her voice clear and strong, "you found me when I was lost and helped me build a home. You've shown me that love doesn't have to hurt, that trust can be rebuilt, that two people can create something beautiful together. I promise to love you, to support your dreams, to tend this life we've planted together. Andrea, I said, my voice rough with emotion, you've taught me that home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. It's the peace I feel when I see you reading by the fire, the joy I feel when you laugh at something one of your students said, the certainty I feel that whatever challenges come, we'll face them together. I promise to love you, to protect what we've built, to grow old with you in this garden we've made. We exchanged rings as the creek murmured beside us and apple blossoms drifted down like snow. It was perfect in its simplicity, meaningful in its connection to the life we'd already begun building together. The reception was held on the lawn, with food prepared by friends and family. My father gave a toast about the importance of building something that lasts, and Andrea's sister spoke about how happy she was to see Andrea find her place in the world. To Samuel and Andrea, she said, raising her glass, who proved that sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for. May brought our honeymoon and the magic of seeing the ocean through Andrea's eyes. We stayed in a small cabin in Cannon Beach, walking for miles along the sand and watching storms roll in from the horizon. It's so big, Andrea said on our first morning, standing at the edge of the waves. I knew it would be big, but seeing it is different from imagining it. Like a lot of things, I said, putting my arm around her. Like what? Like love, I said. Like building a life with someone. You can imagine what it might be like, but the reality is always bigger and more complex and more beautiful than you expected. June brought our return home in the beginning of our life as a married couple. The rhythms of our days were much the same as they had been, but there was a new sense of permanence, of commitment that went beyond the practical arrangements of shared space and shared responsibilities. It feels different, Andrea said one evening as we worked in the garden, wedding rings catching the last light of the day. Being married, I mean. I thought it would feel the same since we were already living together, but it doesn't. How does it feel different? More solid, she said. Like we're not just choosing each other day by day, but we've made a promise that will carry us through the days when choosing feels hard. July brought hot weather and the second harvest from our expanded garden. The children from Andrea's garden club had moved on to fourth grade, but a new group of third graders was eager to learn about growing food and caring for the earth. I want to expand the program next year, Andrea told me as we canned tomatoes in our kitchen. Maybe partner with the high school agriculture class. Create a pipeline from elementary through secondary education. That sounds ambitious, I said. I have big dreams for this place, she said. For what we can build here, what we can teach, how we can make a difference. August brought news that would change our lives in ways we hadn't expected. Andrea came home from a doctor's appointment with a smile so bright it lit up the entire kitchen. I'm pregnant, she said, and the simple words contained all the joy and hope and possibility in the world. I swept her up in my arms, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and told me to be careful. When? I asked when I finally set her down. March, she said, a spring baby. Perfect timing, and I said, born when the garden is coming back to life. September brought the start of Andrea's fourth year of teaching and the challenge of managing morning sickness while trying to maintain her usual energy in the classroom. The kids are starting to notice, she said one evening, looking pale and tired after a particularly difficult day. What do they notice? That I'm not eating my lunch, that I sometimes have to sit down in the middle of lessons, that I keep crackers in my desk drawer. When will you tell them? After the first trimester, she said, when we're sure everything is okay. October brought the first ultrasound and the amazing sight of our child, tiny but unmistakably human, floating in Andrea's womb. We both cried watching the monitor, seeing the strong heartbeat that meant our baby was healthy and growing. It's real, Andrea whispered, squeezing my hand as we watched our child move on the screen. It was always real, I said, but now we can see it. November brought Andrea's announcement to her students and their enthusiastic response to the news that their teacher was going to have a baby. They want to know everything, Andrea told me, laughing as she recounted their questions. When is the baby coming? Is it a boy or a girl? Can they help name it? Will the baby go to their school someday? What did you tell them? That the baby will come in the spring, that we don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet, that we'll choose the name ourselves, and that yes, if we're still living here, the baby will probably go to their school someday. December brought our third Christmas together, made special by the knowledge that next year there would be three of us celebrating. We bought a few small gifts for the baby, tiny clothes and soft toys that we tucked away in what would become the nursery. I can't believe how much our lives have changed, Andrea said one evening as we sat by the tree, her hand resting on her growing belly. Do you mind the changes? Not at all, she said. I love how our life keeps growing, keeps becoming more than what we imagined it could be. January brought the halfway point of Andrea's pregnancy and the knowledge that we were having a daughter. We celebrated quietly at home, toasting with sparkling cider and talking about names and dreams for our child. I want her to love this place the way we do, Andrea said as we walked through the winter garden. Dormant, but full of promise. She will, I said. How could she not? She'll grow up here, learn to garden here, play by the creek, climb the apple trees. February brought nesting instincts and intensive preparation for our daughter's arrival. We painted the nursery a soft yellow-green, the color of new leaves in spring, and set up the crib my father had built from wood taken from our own land. Everything she needs is here, Andrea said one evening as we stood in the finished nursery. Love, safety, a connection to the natural world, a community that will help raise her. March brought our daughter into the world on a morning when the fruit trees were just beginning to bud. Emma Rose Lewis arrived healthy and perfect, with her mother's dark hair and what the nurses assured us were her father's eyes. She's beautiful, Andrea whispered as she held our daughter for the first time. She's perfect, I agreed, marveling at the tiny fingers and toes, the way Emma seemed to study our faces with serious concentration. April brought the adjustment to life as new parents and the obito of watching Emma discover the world around her. We took her outside every day when the weather was warm, letting her feel the sun on her face and the breeze in her hair. I want her first memories to be of this place, Andrea said one afternoon as we sat on the porch, Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. They will be, I said. This is home, for all of us. May brought Emma's first smiles and the return of the garden club, now eager to meet their teacher's daughter. The children were gentle and curious, asking if they could help take care of the baby the way they helped take care of the plants. She's part of the garden now, too, 8-year-old Marcus said solemnly as he looked down at Emma sleeping in her carrier beside the tomato plants. She is, Andrea agreed. We all are. June brought warm weather and long evenings spent on the porch. Emma content to lie in a blanket and watch the leaves move in the breeze, while Andrea and I planned the future of our expanding family and our growing educational programs. I want to write a book, Andrea said one evening as we watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, about using gardens to teach children, about connecting education to the environment. You should, I encouraged her. You have so much to share. July brought the first anniversary of our wedding and in a quiet celebration at home with Emma sleeping peacefully upstairs. We renewed our vows in the garden, just the two of us this time, speaking words of love and commitment that had deepened with the challenges and joys of our first year of marriage. I love you more now than I did a year ago, Andrea said as we stood beneath the apple trees heavy with young fruit. How is that possible? Because now I've seen you as a father, she said. I've seen how gentle you are with Emma, how patient, how completely devoted. It's made me love you in new ways. August brought news that Andrea's book proposal had been accepted by a publisher and that she would have a year to write it while on sabbatical from teaching. I can work from home, she said excitedly, write while Emma naps, research while she plays in the garden. It's perfect timing. September brought the start of the school year and the strange experience of not teaching for the first time in years. But Andrea threw herself into her writing project with the same passion she'd brought to her classroom. I want this book to help other teachers, she said as she worked at the kitchen table, Emma playing nearby in her bouncy seat. I want to show them that education doesn't have to be confined to four walls. October brought Emma's first Halloween and the joy of dressing her as a tiny pumpkin for the Harvest Festival. She was too young to understand what was happening, but she seemed to enjoy the attention and the bright colors of the decorations. Next year she'll be walking, Andrea said, as we watched older children run around in their costumes. She'll be able to participate instead of just observing. November brought Emma's first Thanksgiving and the expansion of our family traditions to include a high chair and baby food alongside the turkey and stuffing. Emma was fascinated by the gathering of people, the sounds of conversation and laughter. She's going to grow up thinking this is normal, Andrea said as she fed Emma sweet potatoes while the adults finished their meal. Big family dinners, everyone talking and laughing together. It is normal, I said. At least it's our normal. December brought Emma's first Christmas and the magic of seeing the holidays through the eyes of a child, even one too young to understand the significance of the day. She was captivated by the lights on the tree, the bright wrapping paper, the constant stream of visitors bearing gifts. This is what I always wanted Christmas to feel like, Andrea said, as we sat by the tree, Emma on her lap, reaching for the colorful ornaments. How does it feel? Like home, she said. Like family. Like everything is exactly as it should be. And now here we are, on this porch where it all began, where Andrea first asked me to pretend I don't hear them inside. But tonight is different. Tonight, the voices inside aren't something to ignore or escape from. Tonight, they're the sounds of celebration, of family, of the life we've built together. Emma is 2 now, running through the house with her cousins who've come for her birthday party. Andrea's sister is here with her family. My parents are in the kitchen, helping clean up after dinner, and friends from town are scattered throughout the house and garden, talking and laughing and celebrating our daughter's 2nd year of life. Do you remember, Andrea says, taking my hand as we sit on the porch steps, that first night you came here when I was so broken I couldn't even trust the sound of people being happy in my house? I remember, I say, Mama. You asked me to pretend I didn't hear them. I was so afraid, she continues. Afraid that if I acknowledged the noise, the chaos, the messiness of other people's lives, it would somehow contaminate the peace I was trying to build. Inside, Emma shrieks with delight as someone, probably my father, chases her around the living room. Andrea's sister calls out that she's found more birthday candles in the kitchen drawer. My mother's voice carries from the dining room as she tells a story about Emma's latest adventure in the garden. And now I ask, though I already know the answer. Now I want to hear all of it, Andrea says, smiling as another burst of laughter echoes from inside. Every voice, every story, every moment of joy and connection. I want our house to be full of the sounds of people who love each other. A screen door slams, and Emma comes running out onto the porch, her dark curls bouncing and her face sticky with birthday cake frosting. Mama! Daddy! She calls, launching herself into Andrea's arms. Grandpa says there are fireflies in the garden. There are, Andrea confirms, settling Emma on her lap. Should we go look for them? Them? Yes, Emma says, then wiggles down and runs toward the garden, her small legs carrying her as fast as they can go. We follow her along with the stream of family and friends who emerge from the house, drawn by the promise of fireflies and the magic of a summer evening in the country. Someone brings a guitar. Someone else carries out glasses of wine and lemonade, and soon we're all scattered across the lawn and through the garden, watching tiny lights blink among the vegetables and flowers. Emma chases the fireflies with the intense concentration only a 2-year-old can muster, her hands cupped and ready to catch the magical creatures that dance just out of her reach. She doesn't catch any, but she doesn't seem to mind. The joy is in the chasing, in the wonder of lights that appear and disappear like tiny miracles. This is what I dreamed of, Andrea says quietly, standing beside me as we watch our daughter play among the plants we've tended, surrounded by people who love her. What specifically? All of it, she says, gesturing toward the scene before us. The garden full of healthy plants, the house full of people who matter to us, Emma growing up knowing she's loved and safe and connected to this place. I understand what she means. This is the life we've built together, plant by plant, season by season, choice by choice. It's not perfect, but it's ours, and it's real, and it's full of the kind of love that grows stronger with time. As the evening deepens and the fireflies become more numerous, the party gradually winds down. Family members gather their children and their belongings, hugging goodbye and promising to get together again soon. Friends from town head home to their own families, their own evening routines. Soon it's just the 3 of us again, sitting on the porch as we have so many evenings before. Emma is tired from all the excitement, curled up on Andrea's lap with her thumb in her mouth and her eyes growing heavy. Should we put her to bed, Ma? I ask. In a minute, Andrea says, stroking Emma's hair. I want to enjoy this a little longer. The three of us, the quiet after the celebration, the feeling that everything is exactly as it should be. I look around at the evidence of the evening's festivities. Wrapping paper scattered on the porch, empty glasses on the railing, the lingering scent of birthday cake and summer flowers. Tomorrow we'll clean up, put things back in order, return to our regular routines. But tonight we can just sit here and appreciate what we've created. Do you ever miss it? I ask. The quiet you had when you first moved here? The solitude? Andrea considers the question, looking out over the garden where fireflies still blink among the tomato plants and bean poles. I miss the simplicity sometimes, she says honestly. There was something peaceful about having only myself to worry about, only my own needs to consider. But I wouldn't trade this chaos for that peace. This is better. This is worth all the noise and mess and complexity. Emma has fallen asleep in her mother's arms, her small body completely relaxed, her breathing deep and even. She looks so peaceful, so secure in the knowledge that she's loved and safe. She'll grow up here, Andrea says softly, as if reading my thoughts. She'll learn to garden in this soil, swim in this creek, climb these trees. She'll go to the school where I teach, probably have some of the same teachers I work with now. Is that what you want for her? To grow up in a small town? I want her to grow up knowing where she belongs, Andrea says. Knowing that she has roots, that she's part of something bigger than herself. If she decides to leave someday, to see the world, or chase dreams we can't imagine, that's fine. But I want her to always have this place to come back to. I think about my own childhood, growing up in this same town, taking for granted the sense of belonging that Andrea had to search for and fight to create. Emma will have that from the beginning, that certainty of place and purpose that comes from being raised by people who chose to be here, who built their life here deliberately and with intention. We should go inside, Andrea says finally. It's getting late, and this little one needs her bed. We gather up the glasses and plates from the porch, turn off the lights, and make our way upstairs. I watch Andrea put Emma to bed, the familiar routine of pajamas and teeth brushing, and one more story, even though Emma is already mostly asleep. Good night, sweet girl, Andrea whispers, kissing Emma's forehead. Dream of fireflies and birthday cake and all the people who love you. We close Emma's door softly and make our way to our own room, where the windows are open to let in the cool night air. Andrea changes into her nightgown while I brush my teeth, and we settle into the comfortable routines of a couple who've learned to share space and time and the small intimacies of daily life. Thank you, Andrea says as we lie in bed, the house finally quiet around us. For what? For this life, she says, for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself, for believing I could belong here when I wasn't sure I could belong anywhere. You built this life too, I remind her. You chose to stay, chose to trust, chose to plant roots and tend them until they grew strong. We built it together, she says, and that's the truth that matters most. Outside our window, the night sounds of summer surround us, crickets chirping in the grass, the distant call of an owl, the soft rustle of wind through the apple trees. These are the sounds of home, of the place we've chosen and the life we've created together. I think about that night 3 years ago, when Andrea first asked me to pretend I didn't hear the voices inside her house. She was so afraid then, so convinced that letting people into her space would somehow diminish the peace she was trying to build. Now our house is full of voices every day, Emma's chatter and questions, the conversations of friends and family who know they're always welcome here. The difference isn't that Andrea learned to tolerate the noise. The difference is that she learned to choose her noise, to fill her space with the voices of people who love her, who support her, who celebrate the life she's built rather than trying to tear it down. I love you, I say into the darkness. Words I've said thousands of times, but that never lose their meaning. I love you too, she replies, her voice already drowsy with approaching sleep. And as we drift off to sleep in the house we've made our home, surrounded by the garden we've grown together and the family we've created, I'm grateful for every choice that brought us to this moment, the broken-down car that led me to stop and help a stranger. Andrea's decision to trust me with her story, her heart, her future. The countless small decisions we've made together, day by day, season by season, to build something lasting and beautiful and real. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities to tend the life we've planted together. Emma will wake up full of energy and questions. Andrea will return to her writing and her teaching, and I'll continue the work of maintaining and improving the home we've created. But tonight, all is well. Tonight, the voices inside are the voices of love and laughter and belonging. Tonight, we don't need to pretend we don't hear them. Tonight, we can listen to them with gratitude and joy, knowing that they're the soundtrack of the life we've chosen, the life we've built, the life we'll continue to tend together for all the years to come.